Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join today. My name is Elias Garcia with CCEDA. I'm really looking forward to teaching you a little bit about ADUs and talking about the programs we have going. But to start, I'm going to introduce the Executive Director of CCEDA, Roberto Barragan. Take it away, Roberto.
Good evening. I am Roberto Barragan. I'm Executive Director of the California Community Economic Development Association, CCEDA. We are extremely proud and happy to be partnering with HOMEPLEX today in bringing this webinar to you. In order for you to learn more and participate that much more in the development of your own accessory dwelling unit, ADU. We have been enjoyed an incredible relationship with CalHAFA this past year in being able to be a grant manager and distributing almost $18 million in grants for CalHAFA to enable individuals to develop ADUs across the state. At $40,000 a unit is one of the most effective ways to increase our housing units in a state that is incredibly needy in terms of housing. So welcome you today. And thank you for being here, and we hope to be able to work with you in the future. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I am Ari Gotti, CEO of HOMEPLEX. We are so grateful to have partnered with such an impactful organization. Thank you, Roberto, and the entire CCEDA team. Our support of CCEDA's efforts in the ADU grant program has grown tremendously this past year. Our team has enjoyed working with hundreds of applicants like you, and we have seen firsthand the life-changing impact this program has had. So many inspiring stories of homeowners who have been able to finally realize their dreams of building their ADU. We often find many homeowners are still very early in this journey and have no idea where to start, which is where we come in, helping homeowners like you develop a solid game plan for your project. Now, we always like to begin wanting to better understand your why. That is, we want to know your story. So that way we could better understand both your immediate needs as well as your long-term goals to ultimately set up your project for success. Today, we're here to share information, clear up confusion, and offer our guidance. We'll be back later in the presentation for additional information and to answer your ADU questions in our Q&A. Now, Elias, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Ari. Okay, some housekeeping stuff right at the top. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them to the Q&A function or the chat function. We will take some time at the end of this webinar to address some of those questions. However, if there are any questions that are specific to the CalHFA grant, that will be answered in the next webinar we have coming up in the series, because the grant status is still sort of not certain, that we're going to tackle in the next upcoming webinar. But we will answer questions about ADUs in general at the end of this session. Also, no need to take notes. You can just sit back and take in all the information for now. We will be sending you the entire slide presentation, and you will have access to a recorded version of this webinar after we complete the webinar. So you'll have all the information in your inbox. Don't worry so much about that. Just try to take in the information for now. But please submit questions. We will address some by the end of the webinar. To reintroduce myself, my name is Elias Garcia. I work as a training and policy manager with CCEDA. I will be doing this presentation along with Ari Gotti, who's introduced himself, my colleague Don Perkins of CCEDA, as well as Robert Hernandez of HOMEPLEX. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so you're seeing on the screen some of what CCEDA and HOMEPLEX have been able to do in partnership with each other over the last year concerning ADUs and ADU grants. This is a partnership we're extremely excited about and we feel has been very successful. And you can see that with some of the metrics you see on screen. Over 14 million in funding dispersed, plenty of grants funded, over 2,000 applications received. But the most important metric that you're seeing here is the over 60% of CCEDA's ADU grants being to low to moderate income applicants. So at CCEDA, this community is our main focus. The low to moderate income community is our main focus. And that's the stories we know. These are the people we've been working with even prior to getting into ADUs, these are the communities that we serve. In comparison to others involved in ADU funding and ADU grant funding, we are basically doubling that number. These are the people we know how to help because we've been doing so for a very long time, and these are the people we're going to continue to focus on. So a little bit about the Cal HFA ADU grant program. This is a program launched in 2021 that's meant to cover pre-development costs in ADU development. All funds in that grant program were reserved in December of 2022. However, the portal was reopened again on March 1st of this year and closed again that very same day because of how many applicants they got, and the funds were fully reserved again. This means it was a very popular program, but all funds were fully reserved as of March 1st. However, $50 million was restored by Governor Newsom in the 2022-2023 budget, specifically for ADU initiatives in the state. And through CCEDA's advocacy, as well as some of your efforts, we did reach out to people to try to assure that this funding continues this grant program. The legislature was able to keep 25 million of the original 50 million for the grant program. However, HFA still needs to make a final determination as to how those funds are going to be used. We are very hopeful that Cal HFA is going to allocate that 25 million to the ADU grant program and extend it. We don't know as of yet, but we are very hopeful that that's going to happen because the program was so successful. So who is Cal HFA? The California Housing Finance Agency. So they're an independent state agency, and they're not a lender, but they partner with approved lenders and approved nonprofits in order to basically assist low to moderate income homebuyers and first-time homebuyers with low interest mortgages and down payment assistance. So I just mentioned that there is not confirmation just yet from Cal HFA on extension of the program. So you might be asking, why apply for the program? Well, as I mentioned before, it was very popular, and the last time it was opened, it was closed the same day because funds were fully reserved within those the hours of that day. This is to say that it's a program that's already been running, that will not take any sort of bureaucratic delay to start up again, and that has people waiting in line already to take advantage of these funds. So if you want to be able to take advantage of the funds in this grant program, you would have to apply as soon as possible to get as far ahead of the line as you can for when that portal opens again. It is a first come, first served program. Another reason to get further up in the line if you want to take advantage of those funds. But even if the grant program, let's say Cal HFA decides not to extend the program, at CCEDA and in partnership with HOMEPLEX, we are seeking new grant and other incentive and lending programs and opportunities so that everyone who applies didn't do so in vain, and we're still able to take that information and still assist you with whatever other grant programs exist, as well as work on developing programs ourselves to be able to further assist you. So even if they don't extend the program, applying through CCEDA is still gonna get you on our books in terms of us being able to assist you in the ADU journey. So now my colleague Don's gonna tell you a little bit about what ADUs are.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Dawn, Marketing and Membership Coordinator at CCEDA. So we're just going to go through the basics right now, and then we're going to continue to go through a little bit more about what an ADU is. But what is an ADU, right? So that's going to be an accessory dwelling unit, okay? It's a smaller independent structure that is cohabiting the same property. So it's adapted seamlessly for like a single family residence or a multi-family residence, or even a agricultural residence as well. So you've probably heard different monikers for them. So like a granny flat, an in-law apartment, a casita, or a secondary suite. To have an ADU, the additional living area has to include a kitchen. So cooking facilities have to be provided, and also a bathroom and then a separate entrance. But the great thing about ADUs is that it's very versatile. So you don't have to have a bedroom. They're optional.
At CCEDA, we've been servicing low to moderate income communities for a very long time. So we have a distinct understanding of what the different issues that these communities are dealing with, specifically after COVID, specifically in the time of sort of economic strife. We've seen a lot of people just facing troubling situations that need a housing solution, or that need a solution that can keep wealth within the family or help build wealth, which we've seen ADUs be a great example of. You're seeing some of the most common reasons on the screen: housing family members, getting additional income from renting out the unit, increasing the value of your property. And there are different real-world examples that we've seen where ADUs can really be life-changing for families in terms of not just the pocketbook, but actually quality of life in general. We've seen situations where maybe a family has older family members that need more assistance, but maybe this family can't afford to put the older family member in a nursing home. Or maybe they don't want to put their older family member in a nursing home because they want to stay close to their family. We've seen ADUs be a great solution to this kind of issue. Nursing homes also cost a lot of money. ADUs can be a situation in which family pools money together that would be less expensive than a nursing home, and is able to house this family member and keep them close to loved ones. We've also seen many situations where a newer generation is trying to start their family. Maybe they just had a child, maybe they are planning on having a child, but looking at the housing market, they're realizing that they're priced out as of this point and need some solution to housing that can build wealth and give them a good quality standard of living. And ADUs have been a great example of this. And we've seen sort of different versions where maybe this new family moves into the ADU and helps pay the costs of that off, right? Instead of using money to rent an apartment somewhere. Or maybe it's a switch where the newer family needs more space and as such will stay in the main house, whereas the owners might decide to move into the smaller ADU unit. Either way, this is a way of keeping wealth within the family, keeping family close together, and assuring a quality standard of living for your loved ones. We've had a lot of people who've experienced issues in the economic downturn, maybe loss of business, loss of income, and ADUs can really be a great source of income in those kinds of situations. And again, we've seen people who benefit from renting out the ADU unit, but we've also seen people who would decide to maybe move into the ADU unit and rent out the bigger portion of the house, which would get them more income. We've seen families who maybe have family immigrating from another country and as of now don't have a means of finding quality housing. An ADU is a situation where they can be close to loved ones, have a quality standard of living, and have affordable housing. So we see a lot of different kinds of situations, a lot of different stories, and we've seen ADUs be a real life changer for these families and really help make sure that wealth can be multi-generational and that housing is adequate in the case of, for instance, older family members who might need more support. ADUs can be designed to take into account maybe mobility limitations on someone. Maybe you have bars or a seat in the shower. These are things that can be taken into account and included in your ADU design to assure standard quality of living. So there are a plethora of reasons to create an ADU. Everyone's story is different. And Robert now is going to talk a little bit about some of the stories that we've experienced in working with families to develop ADUs. But first, before that, apologies. First, I'm going to share the results of the poll So you guys can get an idea of what it looks like in the audience as to why people, what is their primary motivation for building an ADU. And seeing the top two right here, housing family members and rental income, which makes a lot of sense. That tracks with a lot of the stories that we've seen in our work. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Robert.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Hernandez. I'm the Director of Operations and co-founder of HOMEPLEX. Yeah, speaking about the most important thing about the ADU is why we're doing it. Two great opportunities to talk to you about. This is Michelle. She's looking out for the future and she's very adaptable. She's a second grade teacher and she's been teaching for over 34 years. She's the planner. She's the adaptable one, looking for all kinds of what could happen and how she's going to take care of it. She built a detachable ADU and she's looking for a long-term rental for traveling nurses. That seems to be one of the best opportunities. They are there for longer term. 3 months is usually how they set up their contracts. They usually have them already furnished and they're great renters. They work so much that they come in, and when a long-term renter like that's not there, she has the opportunity to have family members there. She also was looking out for possibly caring for elderly people. So when you design that, you can have all of the heights of the countertops, or whether the bathrooms or showers are taken care of. Those are all the things of considering what you're going to use it for. So in her case, she built to the specifications of possibly needing to care for a loved one or an elderly person, or possibly having an older family member that comes and stays. Those considerations are also taken into effect when you have a bathroom and you possibly need somebody in a wheelchair. That's all been taken care of. So not only is she looking for rental income for family members, but also if she wants to live there, she can rent out the house. So that was a great opportunity to utilize the grant, use it now, and also look forward for the future. So she took kind of everything into consideration. The other one we spoke to was Tamiko. I spent a good time talking to her on the phone. That one's a little more personal with me. She did this as a caregiver. She took care of her mom for a good portion of her life from her 20s. Her mom was blind in one eye. So a lot of the things she did to care for her mom didn't have the depth perception. So walking downstairs, things like that, she helped with. Well, her dad had to take care of his father. So he went to Hawaii to take care of his father. She basically took care of her mom. It got tougher. She had to have a place because she couldn't care for her parents. She did a garage conversion. A garage conversion is probably one of the best ways to make an immediate impact. The cost of doing so, much cheaper. It could be done faster, and you can have your family close by. She didn't have the opportunity to, she didn't want to do the detached because she could do the garage conversion much faster, and she could have her family member where they could still retain the dignity of having their own home, smaller. They could still take care of themselves, but they were still close by. So with Tamika, we kind of spoke for a lot longer talking about it, because she was able to talk about how she utilized a lot of the money from the grant. She was able to do it faster, get her parents to where they could still, like I said, they had that area to where she could give them their own space, but still have them close by. So knowing that they were close, they could shut the door, still go about their own, but have their parents close. It was awesome for them. And it was something that they didn't have to worry about how long it would take, versus those are all the considerations you need to take into account. Do you have the time to make it a complete full build that you're doing from the ground up? Or are you able to take care of a space with a junior ADU or a garage that you can take advantage of the space that's already there to convert and do something that's needed in a more timely manner? So those are really important factors that you guys need to consider. And here's two of our new family members that were able to share their experience.
So if you're wondering what type of ADU you want to build, we have some different structure ideas that could fit perfectly with your family. And this is kind of one of the most exciting parts is, hey, I get to build a new structure on my existing home lot or convert something. So it's always kind of nice to have something new. And then also the positivity with it is you can use it for your own space if you want to move into it, or have a rental property to make more income or to help any family members who are in need, elderly or disabled. These are some options depending on how close and how far you want them, right? So we have detached. The detached type is a new build ADU unit, and this is separated from the primary unit. So this is like a guest house, a recreation room, a garage, kind of, or a storage unit, but it's detached, okay? So it depends on the city as well. So the ADU can be up to 1,200 square feet of living space. And it's perfect if you need adequate space for your family in your home, okay? But if you want to keep your loved ones closer, we also have attached units and the junior ADU units, and then also we have the garage conversion. So with the attached, this is attached to the primary residence and it shares a wall, okay? And this can be up to 50% of the square footage of the home. And then we have the junior ADU. So these are tucked inside the primary dwelling and they're typically conversion of the existing space. So that can be like an attic, a basement, or attached garage. So this is going to be the least expensive option. And we're going to get into some more of things to consider with cost and things like that later on, because it is an existing, you're converting an existing space in the home, okay? And this may be up to 500 square feet. Yeah, now that we're comparing about size. And then lastly, we have the detached garages. So that's a garage conversion. So this is the most cost effective too. So if you already have one, great, right? It's going to cost less because it's cheaper than having to do a whole ground construction of a detached ADU, okay? But what also is something that you're going to have to take into factor is the age and the condition of the existing garage. So we'll get into that later on. But each type of ADU offers all these many unique benefits. So the choice is ultimately up to you and what your family specifically needs. So it's whether that's like again, we're explaining whether it's providing a comfortable space or for your family members or exploring rental opportunities. Okay, so there's a lot of versatile solutions for you guys to choose from. And now we're going to go into costs. Okay, so how much is an ADU going to cost my family? Now you might be thinking. So on average, an ADU, a new one in California, is going to cost you probably roughly 150K to 400K. But don't let those numbers scare you. Many factors will affect these prices. So it depends on the size of the ADU type, the location of the ADU, and any quality finishes, and also factor in the cost of furniture and all those other nice little tweaks you want to make, and anything that has to do with, accessibility things. So anything that you're customizing, that's going to factor in with the cost. So with the junior ADUs and the garage conversions, those are going to cost less than the new ADU constructions. Again, because it has an existing foundation and the framing. So this is a popular option for those that are looking to maximize their income and their return on investment. Keep in mind your permits, labor, and any medium range quality finishes, those can range between 100,000 to 200,000 in California. So when building an ADU, there are some critical cost considerations, and we'll get into that as well because you'll have a feasibility report on your location of the ADU. So you got to think about converting the space or doing a ground up build. So it depends on what's on your property, right? Everyone's different. So the conversions are typically less expensive. With the new builds, you're going to have to require infrastructure, a foundation, and a roof. Also to consider is the age of the structure that you're converting. So if you have an old garage or a carport, an attic, or a short attic, or a basement, those may cost a little more just to convert. So it just depends, right? And then if you're looking to do a single story or a multi-story. So the single story, it's going to be cheaper, it's less expensive to build. But the second story, you're going to have to consider the foundation requirements and rebuilding a roof for that one. So that may cost a little bit more money. Also, where your ADU is going to be built is going to be if it's on either a flat foundation or a hillside foundation. So flat lots are going to be easier to build on because it's a stable soil and the foundation options are not as tricky. And with the hillside, that's going to require some expensive grading, retaining walls, raised foundations. That's going to have more extensive foundation work. So just keep in mind these little things. But don't worry, we'll help you out the whole way through. And then also the distance from home to ADU. So where on the property your ADU is from the home, okay? So the further away the ADU is from the home, the more expensive the utilities may be, because that's gonna have to factor in sewer, water, utilities, like electrical and gas. And also, just to keep in mind is the house, if the house has a sewer, or the house with the sewer is less expensive. If you have a house that's on septic, then you have to run a separate septic system for the detached ADU. But if you have an attached ADU, you don't have to worry about the septic or the sewer. You already have the sewer.
Thank you, Don. So you're seeing some of the finance options on the screen. You got your grants, right? That's essentially free money, which I know everybody's like, wait, what? Free money? I don't know if I believe that there is anything as free money. But the reality is that because of the housing crisis throughout the state, many counties, many cities, many localities, the state in general is trying to find ways to incentivize more development of housing. That is to say that there are grant opportunities out there for your ADU project. We talked about the Cal HFA grant program, which covers $40,000 of pre-development costs. But there are other programs out there. So there's the Cal Home program. There's the San Diego Housing Commission ADU finance program. That one actually funds development costs, will cover development costs. The Orange County Housing Finance Trust has a program wherein if you rent to low to moderate income tenants, you can get free money. Alameda County has a program. Different foundations have programs. So there is free money out there, believe it or not, because the state really wants to incentivize the development of housing, and ADUs have proven to be a great solution there. However, if we're not getting access to grants, there are other financing options. You've got your refinance, so borrowing against the value of your home. That's replacing your home mortgage with a new mortgage. There's the second mortgage, which does not replace your previous mortgage, but takes out a second mortgage according to your home value. There are home equity lines of credit, also called HELOCs sometimes. It's a type of second mortgage that allows you to borrow against the equity you have on your home, but as a line of credit. Note for the HELOCs, though, they can be a bit risky because they can be canceled and the interest rate can rise with the market. There are also renovation loans, which take into account the estimated value of your home after renovations are complete. So that allows you to borrow a little bit more than your traditional home equity loan. You can also look into a retirement account secured loan. So borrowing from your 401k or your Roth retirement account, which would be at lower interest rates. And then there's the other option of not having to necessarily go out and get a loan, but pool money together with friends and family. Gifted funds would also be a way to finance an ADU project. And we talked about a lot of situations previously wherein an ADU can be of benefit to multiple members of the family. For instance, in the case of wanting to house an elderly loved one. In this case, you could probably pool money together with the people that are all affected by this and have a much cheaper solution to your ADU development. CCEDA and HOMEPLEX specifically are going to be really helpful in figuring out what's best for you, because one of these is not necessarily better than the other, right? They're all just different. They all are going to have different pros and cons according to what your short-term goals are, what your long-term goals are, and what your current situation is. So we can really help you figure out what is going to be the best option and which makes the most sense for my ADU project. And my colleagues will tell you a little bit about what the timeline looks like for developing your ADU.
So building an ADU, it's really fun and exciting, but it's also a timely project for you and your family. So we're gonna go a little bit into how long does it take to get a permit in California? So depending on your city and the plans in your project scope, that's gonna be a factor in how long it may take to get a permit. But having a permit is extremely important when securing your ADU. You cannot have an ADU without a permit, right? Or at least building a new one. So the time frame may also range for approval process, which can be between 2 to 6 months, and that can be determined by if you have a city-approved ADU plan or a prefabricated unit, right? What's going to make your timeline a little bit slower is if you have a custom build, that's going to typically take a little bit longer with your permit. Also, what factors in for a delay in permits is also if you have any revisions that you need to take on your ADU that needs to comply with code. That can be with your city. So we're going to help you also with that. But these are just some things to keep in mind, right? But just remember that patience is always required for building anything, right?
Thank you, Don. So you're looking at what the steps in the timeline kind of look like in terms of the process for applying for grants or loans to finance the project. You're gonna start with the application. In terms of the grant, we've talked about how you can apply through CCEDA right now. You can get the process started right now. Then there's the approval of the grant or loan. And we feel that a feasibility report at this point of the process is actually going to get you a much more accurate budget so that you can go out and get contractor bids. And that's where HOMEPLEX is an expert in these feasibility reports that can get you contractor bids. Then you go into the disbursement of funds, and then you can begin construction with the loan or grant funds. Now, specific to the Cal HFA ADU grant program, what makes you eligible for the program? So one of the top important things is that you have to fall within the income limit for the Cal HFA program. This is different from county to county. So every county has a different income limit for this program. As of right now, last time I checked in LA County, it was 194,000 was the limit. But this changes. So if you want to be up to date, you can go to CCEDA website or the ADU specific CCEDA website, which is adu.cceda.com. There is a link there that shows the income limits. You can also go on the internet and search for what the income limits are in your county. Or if you continue to be in contact with us, we can help you get that information and figure out whether you are eligible in terms of income. Another eligibility is that the property owner, or so the property must be owner occupied at the time of building the ADU. Another eligibility is that the applicant has to be on the deed, and then anyone who's on the deed that lives in the house must be included on the application. This is an issue that we've seen a couple times where those other people that are on the deed and living in the house were not included in the initial application. We want to make sure we're including them because that is another eligibility for the grant program. Now, what are you going to need to go ahead and apply for the grant? This stuff is mostly electronic. You're not going to be dealing much with pen and paper. So you got to make sure that you have access to a computer and the internet. But you're seeing on screen some of what you'll need in terms of documentation. So we'll need a source of funds, which is important to make sure that you have adequate funds to complete a successful ADU project from start to finish. And this is going to look different according to how you make money. If you're a wage earner, you're going to see bank statements, paycheck stubs. If you're a small business owner, this might include profit and loss sheets, as well as the bank statements. You're going to need first 2 pages of 2022 tax returns or W-2s, mortgage statements, that's both second and first, if you have a first and a second mortgage out, your basic valid ID, and then a completed CCEDA application signed by all applicants. Remember, that includes anyone else who's on the deed and living in the house. They've all got to be on the application. And you're also going to need a construction and pre-construction budget. And this is where HOMEPLEX can be really helpful. It's required in order to establish how much you're going to need to complete the entire thing and make sure that it's going to be completed from start to finish. But you can get contractors' bids after developing a feasibility report with the help of HOMEPLEX. And to speak a little bit more to HOMEPLEX, HOMEPLEX provides technical assistance for ADUs and grant requirements, specifically in feasibility, reports, design, and permitting. But of course, Ari knows much more about HOMEPLEX's role than I do. So Ari is going to speak a little bit to how HOMEPLEX can help and what their role can be in your ADU journey.
So we're at HOMEPLEX, our staff has really enjoyed working with all the CCEDA applicants. I got to tell you, each one of these is a very unique puzzle. You know, you have unique situations for every applicant. Everybody has different needs, different goals. So it's just been really enjoyable to help work through each individual circumstance. I can't say we've seen it all, but the last year we've certainly seen a lot. So we have a lot of insight to provide. But the one thing on this subject I would say is, you know, applicants having a complete budget early on the process really has been critical to success, not only with the grant program, but also just in success of the ADU project. So we get a lot of confusion over the project budget. A lot of people believe they have to go out and get a contractor's bid, and really it's putting the cart before the horse, because most contractors, if you go to them, will not really even want to waste time unless you already have a design. So the point of the feasibility report that we provide and others provide is really to provide, A, is what I want to do feasible on the land? B, is it feasible for me? Like with my financial resources, am I better off? You know, do I have the $400,000 or $500,000 to build a 2-story, 1,200 square foot ADU, or am I looking more like $100,000 to $200,000 to convert my garage or part of my home into an ADU? So a lot of that feasibility isn't just can I build it, but you know, what should I build and how do I pay for that and how do I budget for it? So we really help handhold people along the way to figure out how to do that. And as professionals, we really have a good idea of the cost. We work with dozens of contractors. As you can imagine, we've seen hundreds and hundreds of bids, and we have a really good idea of what things are expected to cost. So once we're able to nail down what you want to build, we can provide a really good idea, not only of the project budget, but also separate things out that qualify for the grant, like, you know, how much is it going to cost to get permits, or my DWP, my utilities, all the things covered by the grant, my architecture, which we also help with, and permitting as well, to even financing. So the grant, if you're working with a lender, the grant will also pay for your financing costs. There's a lot of things the grant pays for. All those costs are part of what we call the project budget. So that includes both your soft costs, that's all the upfront costs, financing costs, as well as the hard costs, which are your construction costs. That's your materials and labor to actually build your ADU. And there's a lot of prep costs as well. And the good news is a lot of those prep costs are also covered by the grant. So things like preparing your lot, clearing your site, you know, demolishing a garage if you had to, or a shack to make room. So all those things are covered, and that's something we really help with. If you're already working with a contractor, if you already have a design and you already have a bid, absolutely the bid that you have should satisfy the request. The only thing you're going to have to provide, which your CCEDA grant advocate can provide for you, is a template for your pre-construction budget. So one of the requirements by CalHFA is that you've filled out a detailed pre-construction budget. That is a budget for the specific things that $40,000 grant covers. So most contractors will not have provided that to you if you have a contractor bid, but if you provide the template, they'll be able to fill that out for you. The other thing to note is it's a budget. You're not going to be held to those numbers. So if you come out and say, I'm budgeting $15,000 for my architecture and structural engineering, and it ends up costing 12 or ends up costing 20, that's okay. All that matters at the end of the day is that you submit qualified expenses, to CCEDA, and that CCEDA can review those invoices to get those paid on your behalf. So don't get too caught up in the budget. It's important. The pre-construction budget, you must have it, but the most important thing is really having a solid budget. And the reason that CCEDA needs to see you have a solid budget is they need to make sure that you can build a real project and end up with a success as opposed to a half-built project. So, we often see a lot of these remodeler companies that aren't used to doing ground-up construction. They started with garage conversions, now they're doing ground up. A lot of times, a lot of the costs are underestimated. The last place we want to see you and the last place CCEDA wants to see you is underestimating the cost and finding yourself halfway through scrambling for funds. The state also requires a budget because they don't want to be releasing $40,000 in state money. The reason they want to put that $40,000 out is to create new housing, ideally affordable housing. Well, if the ADU doesn't get finished, then that $40,000 hasn't gone to good use. So CCEDA does require that you have a solid budget, and we help you through that process without you feeling like you have to go rush out and get a contractor bid, get frustrated because contractors aren't calling you back, or contractors are just telling you what you want to hear to get your business and are going to throw something together for you that really doesn't provide you any kind of value. So, there's really 3 distinct phases that we like to break it into. The first being feasibility and design, like I talked about, is it feasible? And then let's help you design that ADU. Once you have a design, then you're really set up to either start with talking to contractors, but you certainly could start your permitting process. You could start getting the ball rolling with the city. Typically, it takes at least 2 months, as much as 6 months, depending on the city, to get your permits. So that's something you don't want to wait for. You don't necessarily want to wait to get a contractor to submit for your permits. And then finally, you want to get a reputable contractor. You want to get somebody who's not going to tell you what you want to hear. You want to get somebody who's actually going to be able to perform. So we always recommend getting at least 2 or 3 bids. Those bids should be comparing apples to apples. Again, that's why it's critical you have a real design. If I ask you to bake your cake and I provide a recipe and the ingredients, then you can get an apples to apples comparison. If you just say, I want a cake, what is that, a cupcake, a wedding sheet cake? You got to have a scope. You got to be very specific. So those are really the 3 things that we help you along that ADU journey, every stage along the way. Upfront right now, we're really here to help CCEDA's applicants just get through this first phase. Let's get you a budget. Let's work with you on what your options are, what is feasible, what is within your means. Maybe it's a step-by-step process. Maybe, even though you want that 750 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath ADU detached in your backyard, maybe the most accessible thing today is to convert a garage at $150,000, give or take, get that rented out, get the income in. And in a year, 2 years from now, when you have the income coming in, you can go refinance based on the income, based on the increase of your property. One thing we absolutely love about garage conversions is one of the biggest challenges with these ADUs is the valuation, is the appraisal. So the beauty of doing a garage conversion is you're actually adding livable space, sellable space to your home. So if you have a 1,200 square foot home and you have a 400 square foot garage, when you're done, you actually have a 1,600 square feet of livable space. So that's your biggest bang for the buck. We do these all day long. Return on investment is almost 90% plus higher when we're talking about garage conversions. That being said, if what you really want is that detached ADU or 2-story ADU and you have the budget for it, we're here to support you with it. We just want to make sure everybody goes in with eyes wide open. Very common for people to underestimate the cost, especially a lot of the soft costs. Those add up, and that's really what that grant was meant for. The reason the state came out with the grant originally, when the state released the grant a couple of years ago, it was a $25,000 grant. That ended up getting raised to $40,000 to be able to cover things like lender fees, things like the administrative fees for organizations like CCEDA to be able to support this program and be able to support you until you get your certificate of occupancy. So we're really, really blessed to be working not only with CCEDA, but with you. We'd love to help you out. And just one thing to note, like I had said, all these things are covered by the grant. So in the event that you are awarded the grant, things like feasibility, design, permitting, all those things are all qualified grant expenses. So look forward to working with everybody. I know we're going to be doing a Q&A at the end that Rob and I will be chiming in on questions. Just so everybody knows, there's a lot of questions. I know everybody can't see all the questions because we're moderating it, but there's 100 questions that have come in. We're going to try to get the common themes and answer some of those without keeping you here all night. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on the Q&A. Any others, we're going to go ahead and put a Q&A together. We are only going to answer the questions regarding ADUs in general, not the grant, because we are, together with CCEDA, going to do a follow-up in a week or two. We'll be sending out additional information on exactly how to apply for the grant. So this was really more of an overview. The next one's going to be a deep dive into the application. But what we will do is there were a lot of questions that came into the Q&A. We will assemble those questions and make sure those are all answered in the next session. So don't worry, your questions will be answered. We also saw a lot of questions about people that wanted somebody to reach out to them, whether it be HOMEPLEX or CCEDA. CCEDA and HOMEPLEX will be following up on those as well.
Thank you, Ari. So you've completed the first course. You have gone through the first webinar. We do plan on doing follow-up webinars that are going to be specific to different portions of the process that go a little more in depth than we did today. So you're seeing on the screen some of what we're going to follow up with. A webinar specific to the ADU grant, one specific to financing your ADU, one specific to feasibility, design, and build, one specific to permitting and paperwork, one about choosing a contractor, and then lastly, one about managing a rental property, because we know that a lot of people who develop ADUs are doing so to be able to rent out the unit. So be on the lookout for that. We will be emailing you follow-ups. We don't have a date set just yet for this next webinar, but like Ari said, should be scheduled within the next 2 weeks, and we will give you information about that through your email. So just check your email, and you should be up to date with everything that we send you. But now, Q&A. We can get to some of these questions that have been stacking in the Q&A function for this whole webinar. A reminder that we're only answering ADU general questions as of now. We are taking the grant questions, so if you have questions about the grant, go ahead and put it in because we will be taking them into account. However, that's going to be informing our next webinar, not this one. Nonetheless, I'm about to shoot some questions out so that Ari and Robert can give us some answers. So
I got one for you, Ari. Letty would like to know, is there an end date to ADUs? I heard from someone that new ADUs will no longer be allowed in 2025.
So the great news is there's actually a bill that just got passed by the legislature and is going to be signed any day by the governor that actually extends and sunsets out the owner occupancy requirement. So what you're actually referring to is not that ADUs wouldn't be allowed. In the past, you had to be owner occupied in order to have an ADU. Back in 2020, not 2019, when the legislation was passed for 2020, they actually pushed it out and said, you know what, we're not going to require owner occupancy for ADUs, but we're only going to do that until 2025. And there is now a new bill. I'll get that number for you, but there's a new bill that will allow the, it is, actually, let me get that for you right now. It is AB 976 by Assembly Member Phil Ting, which eliminates that sunset provision from the ADU law. In other words, indefinitely, not only will ADUs be allowed, but ADUs will not require owner occupancy, with one exception. Junior ADUs, JADUs, where you're converting existing space, that's converting a garage, an attached garage, a basement, a bedroom, an attic. Those can only be 500 square feet. And if it's permitted as a JADU, it does require owner occupancy. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about doing an ADU, of whether you do an ADU, attached ADU, or a JADU, is the owner occupancy. So that is not being sunsetted, to be clear. But for just regular ADUs, attached and detached, you won't have to worry about that owner occupancy. So the answer is no, it's not going away. It's here to stay.
another question here, if one were building a duplex, as long as one of the two units was physically smaller, could it be classified as an ADU?
So it depends if it's a duplex, an existing duplex, or if we want to create a duplex. So part of the HOMEPLEX name is all about turning your home into a duplex, triplex, fourplex. In the past, anybody could go to the city and try to rezone a single family into a duplex. And that was a very, very difficult, very expensive proposition. By adding an ADU, And I believe it's a preferred method because not only is it quicker and cheaper, but it's a lot more accessible, and all cities are required to do it under California law. You're essentially creating a duplex. So it's not zoned as a duplex, but you now have a second rentable unit. If you do an ADU plus a JADU, which remember the JADU will require owner occupancy, you now have a triplex. So you could essentially take any single family home and make it into a duplex or triplex. That said, if you have a duplex, you actually are still allowed to add an ADU. So you can make that duplex, for example, into a triplex by adding an additional unit, an ADU to it.
We have another question here. Are soil reports required for attached and or detached ADUs?
That's actually a wonderful question. It really depends when you say attached or detached. So for detached, the typical answer is yes. Most cities will require a soils report, or they're going to require you to over-engineer the foundation. But every city is different. So it really is very city dependent. When it comes to conversion of existing space, like a JADU, or creating a garage conversion, even a detached garage conversion, because that structure already exists, you do not need to do a soils report. And that's actually one of the many reasons why conversions are a lot less expensive than a ground up ADU, because you don't have to provide soils reports. You don't have to provide property surveys. The only time you have to do a property survey is if you're worried about the setback, because you need to know where you're setting back from. Where is the property line that 4-foot setback is going to be counted from? But if you're taking an existing garage, a detached garage, for example, and converting that, you're converting existing space. You don't have to worry about that. So you get out of both the soils report as well as the survey requirements.
Another question, can you build 2 ADUs on one main property?
That's a really good question. And that comes back to the city. So the state law allows, again, 1 ADU, 1 JADU. So yes, across the state, if you do an ADU up to 1,200 square feet, some cities 1,000, and you do a JADU up to 500 square feet, then that's 2 ADUs, an ADU and a JADU. There are some cities that allow more than that. So the state law basically tells every city the minimum thing that they must allow their citizens to do, their homeowners to do. But they can go beyond that. So as one example, San Diego has a bonus ADU program that will allow you to build a bonus ADU for every low income rental ADU that you build. So I know one project right now in San Diego, they're actually building 17 ADUs. So people could take that to a crazy level. But in general, the answer is yes, you could do 2 if it's a JADU and an ADU. If it's a multifamily property, you actually can do 2 detached ADUs to a multifamily. So it's not a simple answer, but yes, pretty much across the board, there's a way to get 2 ADUs.
And actually a follow-up to that one, can the ADU have 2 or 3 stories?
Absolutely. We're seeing them all the time. There are height restrictions in the state. So there used to be a height restriction mandated, or that cities had to allow up to 16 feet. That's actually been raised now. If it's within a half a mile of a bus stop, you can go up to 18 feet. And if it's attached to the home, it can go as high as a 2-story attached home. So if you have a 2-story home that's 24 foot tall, you can make the ADU the same 24 foot tall as an attached ADU. I believe the limit on that is 25 feet. 3-story, most likely not, but certainly you can go to 2-story.
How much are the property taxes, and will that impact affordability?
So the answer is it will impact the property tax, but not by as much as you might think. It's not going to result in a reassessment of your entire property. So under Prop 13, if you bought your property 10 years ago at $500,000 and it's now, with cost of living increases, $600,000 in terms of what you pay taxes on, they're not going to reassess your entire property. What they will do, the city, county, will look at the improvements to that property, either by square footage added or by dollars invested, and they will increase, no different than if you did a remodel. If you did an addition to your home and added 500 square feet to your home, it's looked at very much the same way. So it will increase it, but it will be incremental, and it will still grandfather in the base of your existing property tax.
Okay. One question, for an unattached ADU, is there a certain certain amount of feet that it needs to be from the property line?
So for a detached ADU, it's 4 feet, unless there's an existing structure. So if you have an existing, let's say 2-car garage, that the wall of that garage is right up to the lot line, you actually can leave that there as long as you're converting the garage. You're grandfathering in that non-conforming wall that's less than 4 feet away. Anything you add to that structure, let's say you want to increase the size, you have a 400 square foot garage and you want to add 300 feet to it, you could do that, but the addition has to be 4 feet away from the property line. So for the detached, new build, garage conversion, yes, it has to be 4 feet away unless it's existing. In the case of an attached ADU, you have to conform to the city's setback requirements for the home. So if the home is requiring a 15-foot setback in the backyard from the property line, whatever you end up building, you can't go to the 4 foot. You can't go all the way back to 4 feet unless it's detached. So again, pros and cons. Every one of these is a unique puzzle to figure out. There's also a lot of advantages to going attached. When you do an attached ADU, once you have a certain amount of feet attached to the house from the ADU building, you get out of your solar requirement. All new ground up detached construction in California requires solar. That by itself is a $20,000 potential fee. If you have existing solar on your house and it's enough capacity, you can actually get out of that requirement. But in general, you will have to do solar if you do detached. So
someone is saying they've already submitted their application, but they need to make the amendment to include another owner or another person on the deed. How can they amend the application to include that second owner?
So the best way is just to get in touch with your CCEDA grant advocate. And that grant advocate you're going to have to log back into the CCEDA portal where you did your application and add an additional applicant. But that is certainly something that we've seen done quite a few times because people will not realize the other person's on the deed and need to add that later. But that is not a problem. From what we've seen, most of the submissions that CCEDA has done back to CalHAFA with additional applicants, as long as the income limits are conforming, there shouldn't be a problem adding those additional applicants.
Okay, and that is our last question for the night. Apologies, I know there's like a ton of other questions.
We've got most of the ADU questions that we could answer all night long. Specific grant CCEDA questions that we couldn't help with, we'll make sure we help and we'll get those answered too. We can give you an email address that I would say you guys can send an email. We'll promise to get back and get these questions answered to. You can go ahead and send that to advocate@adu-ceceda.com. That'll create a ticket. It might take a little bit to get somebody back to you. We'll make sure that between HOMEPLEX and CCEDA, somebody will get back to you. We'll get your questions answered. We're as transparent as possible. There's more people than we can answer tonight, but we'll make sure that someone from our organization will get back to you and help you get through this process.
Advocate@adu-ceceda.com. So reach out to there with any questions. We won't be answering any more questions tonight. Apologies. But if you feel like you have most of the information you need and you just want to start the process, go ahead and do so. You're seeing the website on screen that can take you to start the process, adu.ceceda.com. Go on the website. There'll be a button that says start the process, and you can go ahead and start applying. Remember, there's a certain, remember the documents that are necessary, but if you didn't have all that memorized, remember that we're sending you all of this after the webinar. You'll get the PowerPoint, you'll get access to a recording of this webinar, and HOMEPLEX will be sending an ADU checklist. So make sure to take note of your email inboxes after today. Pay attention to when we're going to hold our next webinar. Look out for that announcement, and then send any questions you might have to advocate@adu-ceceda.com. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to seeing more of you in the future in our follow-up courses that are going to be a little more in depth. But thank you all. Have a great night and see you soon.